Hi there. So good to be with you guys this week at your Passion Week. Now, you probably don't know me, so let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Louise. I work for Ictus Flanders, just over the border in Belgium. But as you can probably tell, I'm definitely not from around these parts. I'm from the UK, and my job is working with students. I love to work with students, and I don't know if you can see my poster here, but our tagline in Ictus Flanders is Geloof in studenten, which means believe in students. And I really do believe in students, so it's so great to be able to speak to you guys today. And what we're going to be speaking about today is morals. Now, that feels like a big question for someone who studied musicology at uni and not philosophy. And so I'm not going to go down a super philosophical route. But for the last term or so, I've been studying for a course called Religion, Society and the Law. And I have been thinking a lot about culture and about morals from a law perspective and from a religion's perspective. So I hope that I can help you unpack some of this today. So our question is world of morals. Where do norms and values really come from? So before we start, I wonder if we can just define what norms and values are. For me, norms would define something that means the normal everyday things that we expect in life, right? So I'm British, so my norms pretty much consist of access to really good cheddar cheese, access to fresh milk, and I think that's pretty much summed up me. Unfortunately, I live in Belgium, so you can tell that my dreams have been well and truly shattered by living here. They put UHT milk in tea. Very sad. And then our values are things that we find very important. Now, I might joke around about the UHT milk and tea, but for me that's very important. But maybe they're the things that we value. And when I did this talk for you guys yesterday, I asked you, why don't you just put some things in the chat which are the most important things for you in the world? Maybe you want to take a moment to answer that question yourself. What is the most important thing in your life? And the amazing thing that I loved is that many of you who came to the talk yesterday, your answer to that was people. And for a lot of us, that is the most important thing in our life. But we can have that in Europe mostly because we have access to so much other stuff. So I said that my norms and values in many ways come from my sense of identity, my sense of being British. And I wonder if you can recognise some of the things that you value because of your nationality, because of your culture, because of the worldview you've been brought up with. Maybe even because of your political affiliations or because of the friends that you have. You might find some things more important than others. For instance, I always used to use margarine until I moved in with a housemate and lived with her for 4 years, and she thought it was the worst thing ever and an absolute moral obscenity to use anything other than butter. Now I can't use anything other than butter. People rub off on us. The people around us who we care about influence the way that we think about the world. Now, for a moment, we'll put aside maybe some of the more trivial things, because I'm sure you didn't come to this talk because you wanted to think about triviality. But I just wanted to help you to bring to mind some of the things that maybe you think about as being important, that maybe other people in the rest of the world don't. To give you another little funny example of things that you might take for granted, I love the fact that here in Belgium, in Flanders, I've had to learn to adapt my way of telling the time. Because if I say that someone should meet me at 10:30 and they think, 10:30, they'll actually be there an hour earlier than me. And that can come into a little bit of bother. Now, I explained this to my British friend a few weeks ago. We were on the phone and I was saying to him, isn't it funny because, they have this different way. And he said, that's ridiculous. No, they're wrong. Half 10 is 10:30, of course it is. He absolutely could not wrap his head around the idea that it might mean something else. And that's because my friend's worldview is just entirely dependent on the fact that he's lived in Britain and Britain alone in an English-speaking country for his entire life. Why would that same thing mean something different somewhere else? Now, I would like to make just one final comment on this, that half of 10 is 5 and you're all wrong. But there's another trivial example of things that maybe we see differently, depending on where we are. Now, let me move on to this on a bigger scale. As Europeans, we are all part of something called the European Court of Human Rights. Now, if you don't know much about this court, it's a court in Strasbourg in France, and it's where any matters surrounding this Charter of Human Rights can be disputed. Now, this charter is signed by 47 member states. Do you really think that we're all aligned within those 47 member states? Now, in Strasbourg, they go through a process, and on the most part, it's individual people like you and me versus the state versus their local government. And if you have a problem, that's where you take it. Now, unsurprisingly, they have a big backlog of cases. They're always dealing with cases that are at least several months to up to a couple of years old, because there's so many people that feel at some point in their life, do you know what? I really don't feel like my government's ideas of what is morally correct and right lines up with what mine is. I don't think the way that they have interpreted this Charter of Human Rights lines up with the ideas that I have. And that's good, it's good to have a place to challenge that. But here's a really interesting fact. There's also something within the European Court of Human Rights called the margin of appreciation. So the same case taken by someone in Italy versus a case taken by someone from the Netherlands may well come out with a different outcome, because the values and norms within Italy will be different on some matters than the values and norms of some things in the Netherlands. You see, even if we all agree to the same charter on human rights, we can't always agree to how things go, because we will always be measuring things according to our culture, according to those influences that we've grown up around. And yet, there are some things, I bet you're thinking, that I just can't leave alone. You're thinking, Louise, that's all very well about whether or not a teacher is going to get removed for leaving the church, or that's all very well for matters which don't really matter. But what about the things that really matter? Those things that I just can't shake, that I just refuse to believe are different anywhere else in the world. And as we know, Westerners have quite a long and fairly uncomfortable history of trying to claim that we have it the right way. So we can't just base things on our norms and our values, can we? And as any budding armchair philosopher would tell you, or as I was told in a salon? No, I don't know. I was told the Dutch word for it. Maybe a salon philosopher. Anyway, you will know that a lot of these things are categorised into the age-old debate between what is nature, so what is naturally inherently born into you, and what is nurture. So we've just spent a lot of time thinking about nurture, haven't we? And as we've just discovered, quite a lot of our stuff is based on our environment and our upbringing, so on nurture. Now, when I read the Bible, that's the book of the Christian faith, I'm actually kind of astounded, because me, a Westerner, can take stories of a religion that's entirely rooted in the Middle Eastern culture from 2,000 years ago and still shape my life, my norms and my values and my morals around it. That doesn't make sense. That somehow my lens through which I view the world comes out in a way that matches up with this thing that is miles away from what I could ever be said to be living. So how does that work? Could it be possible that there's some innate humanness, maybe you want to call it, to all of us that somehow transcends our environment and kind of shady cultural viewing? Now, I'm certainly not here to say that the Bible is a surefire handbook full of goodness and you will never find anything wrong with it. No, certainly not. I'm pleased to say I'm not in the habit of stoning people when I disagree with them. And I'm quite frankly really not on board with some of the practices of the early books of the Bible. I remember a time a few years ago when I'd first left university, reading through a certain book of the Bible, getting so angry that I threw my Bible across the room. The Bible is full of stories of people, imperfect people, who definitely get things wrong. And I think that's true of Christians across the world, isn't it? I'm sure you can think of many examples of Christians that you don't really like. And so I can see why quite a lot of you are thinking, you know what? No. Christians do not get to claim moral superiority. You cannot tell me that in a world of morals, Christianity have got the answer. Look where religion's got us. Look at what's in their book. Maybe you agree with the famous Richard Dawkins, who said this, and I think this should pop up on the screen at this point. Let's imagine, with John Lennon, a world with no religion. Imagine no suicide bombers, no 9/11, no 7/7, no crusades, no witch hunts, no gunpowder plot, no Indian partition, no Israeli-Palestinian wars, no Serb-Croat Muslim massacres, no persecution of Jews as Christ killers, no Northern Ireland troubles, no honour killings, no shiny, suited, bouffant-haired televangelists fleecing gullible people of their money. God wants you to give till it hurts. Imagine no Taliban to blow up ancient statues, no public beheadings of blasphemers, no flogging of female skin for the crime of showing an inch of it. That's what Richard Dawkins says in his book, The Gods of Delusion. And folks, to an extent, I agree. And so for a moment, I'd like you to look past the people that you know, the Christians that you can think of who haven't been good or kind, and look with me to the person they claim to follow. Are their actions really consistent with who they claim to follow? Let me give you an example. Imagine next week the guys from the Passion Week committee decide to form a tribute band to Queen. Now, I don't know much about the musicality of the Passion Week committee, but I don't really know if they're up to much. Now, then they have half an hour's practice and they book out the biggest nightclub in Eindhoven that you've got. And it's the first week that bars and nightclubs are open again. And a group of international students go, "Ooh, look, Queen. I think they're a band. Never heard of them before. But it's a night out. We haven't had one yet. We haven't seen any live music since we got here. So let's go for it." And they go down and see your friends from the Passion Week committee. And, well, needless to say, it's pretty awful. And you see these international students legging it, like running really fast out of the bar. And you catch up with them and you say, guys, I'm really sorry that you saw that. And they're like, no, it's fine. Queen are awful. Queen, terrible. Never gonna listen to their music. Now, I wouldn't blame them for saying that. And let me say this. There have been hundreds and thousands of Christians, and indeed followers of other religions, who have been bad representations of the God they claim to follow. When we look at Christians throughout history, those who have claimed to follow Christ, it's fair to say that there have been quite a few who have done a really bad job of representing Jesus. They're people that have claimed to follow him. They've claimed things in the name of Jesus, but I would say they've been pretty inconsistent and bad representations of this Jesus that they claim to follow. We can take the Crusades as an example, can't we? When people say they were being faithful to Jesus, I would suggest that actually if they'd read the Bible, they would realise how inconsistent that was with Jesus' message. In fact, I think it's kind of ironic because Jesus at his trial said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were so, my followers would have fought with swords." Jesus told his followers instead to put away their swords. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And yet the Crusades was interested in almost a complete opposite message to what Jesus teaches. So Christians haven't always been who Jesus asked them to be. And I think that there's a place for me to say to anyone who's been hurt by the church, to anyone who's not been treated like the full, beautiful, incredible, wonderful, whole person that they are, anyone who's been in a place that they thought was safe but wasn't, to you I want to say I'm sorry. The church has failed you. And whether you want to call it moral relativism or just plain violation of your basic human rights, I want to show you more than anything that the Jesus these people claim to follow, the God these people claim to follow, he has not and will not condone their actions. Let's go back to our international students for a moment. Imagine you know actually that there's a really good, like top class tribute band to Queen playing next week. And you invite your international student friends to come and hear it. I promise you, actually, Queen are pretty good. Come see these people. I hope it changes your minds. In the same way, there are good Christians who you might know. Maybe they have represented Jesus well, but I'm sure you can say to me, that's fine, Louise, there are good and bad people in everything. This still doesn't prove to me that in any way that God could be a moral compass for me, that in any way I could find norms and values in this world through that kind of faith. Well, you're right. There are good and bad Christians across the world, and there probably always will be. But I want to invite you to look at that person that these people claim to follow and work it out for yourself. And just like with the international students that we're trying to introduce to Queen, the best thing to do would be to download Spotify on their phone and download the best Queen album we can think of, or open up our laptops and find a good YouTube video of Queen themselves playing. I invite you to look at God for yourself. And the great thing is that the Passion Week Committee have a whole load of these uncover books for you. They have them in English and Dutch, so I invite you and encourage you to read it in the language that you feel most comfortable. It's really short, it's really small. You can read it by yourself or you can read it with a friend. It's got some good questions to help you think a bit deeper at the end. Tell me, when you look at Jesus, who do you see? What do you see? Because maybe you already know this. I don't know if you do. But the overwhelming message from Jesus himself was this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. All the law hangs on these two commandments. Deep in amongst all this moral relativism, there's still something, isn't there? Something in us. It's looking at every soul-searching human, every religion, every person who has sought to do good. You might call it humanity, and I do too, but I think that humanity comes from something a bit more. Every human has a yearning, a longing for change, a kind of sense that the world is just sort of off kilter. It's not quite right. And it's not how it should be. And so we search and we imagine and we seek justice. And despite centuries of trying, we still haven't got it right yet. And friends, I'm not sure if we ever will. But what we can agree on, what we can unite together on, is that the world's in a mess. And yet, in amongst all the brokenness and the disenchantment, it's such a beautiful place. Maybe our deep sense of understanding of injustice that doesn't come from our culture or our upbringing is born into all of us. It's how we were made by a creator. And friends, I invite you today, consider this: your yearning, your sense of morality, your feelings that sometimes the church makes it so much worse, your feelings of anger towards injustice, they are right, they are good, and maybe they exist in you for a purpose. So I invite you today, why not search for yourself? Keep searching and look at Jesus for yourself.